So, as promised, today we're going to talk about hurricanes, and I'm going to read the Magic School Bus inside a hurricane. Like most Magic School Bus books, there is a lot of text in here. I'm going to try and read through most of it to give you the most information out of the book. But I don't want to keep you too long, so I'm going to only pick and choose a few things to read from it. Have you heard about our teacher, Miss Frizzle? Her clothes are wild, her school bus is wacky, and her class trips are weird. Whenever we study something in her class, we get into it in a really big way. We were learning about weather. Absolutely everything in our room was about rain or snow or sun or wind. Every kid in the class was doing a weather project. We were even listening to weather reports on Mrs. Frizzle's radio. And look, they were documenting the weather throughout the week, just like you guys have been doing. And here's a question and an answer for you. Why is the temperature usually higher in the afternoon? Because by afternoon, the sun has been warming things up all day long. So, we weren't surprised one morning when Miss Frizzle said, "It's a perfect day for our trip to the weather station." We hadn't finished our experiments about air, but with Frizzy at the wheel, we were going, ready or not. She says, "We'll meet a team of weather forecasters. We'll learn about our atmosphere." Arnold never wants to go on the trips, and he's saying, "Sorry, I can't go, Miss Frizzle. I have to sharpen my pencil." "But Arnold, maybe we'll have a real adventure." In that case, I have to sharpen several pencils." Another question and answer for you. When does the weather change? The answer says, when the air changes. Is the air hot or cold? Is it dry or moist? Is it still or moving? When these things change, the weather changes. In no time, we were riding along in the old school bus. We were trying to get some music on the radio. We didn't see Mrs. Frizzle turning a strange little dial on the dashboard. We didn't notice that the bus was changing. All of a sudden, Dorothy Ann said, "Look!" We couldn't believe it. We were all wearing flying suits. We were sitting in a basket. The bus had turned into a hot air balloon, and we were about to lift off. Over here it says, what makes wind? A mass of heavy air rolls in and pushes on a mass of lighter air. When the air masses move, that is wind. Winds range from gentle breezes to strong gales that can destroy things. And over here it says, heat makes air expand. Hot air expands because heat makes air molecules bounce far apart. And that's what helps that hot air balloon fly up in the sky. We started going up, and Mrs. Frizzle said, "Did I mention, children, that hot air rises?" We rose higher and higher. Even though hot air was filling the balloon, the air around us was growing colder. We had to put on warm jackets. Going up, better bundle up. Warm air rises from Earth. As it goes up, it gets colder. Warm air rising from Earth carries lots of water vapor molecules, Mrs. Frizzle continued. As the air rises, it cools down. The water condenses in the air and forms clouds. We talked about the other day how it latches onto dust particles and makes those clouds. We drifted into the center of a cloud. Mrs. Frizzle was right. It was damp in there. The cloud was made of tiny water droplets hanging in the air. talks about some of the different types of clouds that I explained to you. They have the cirrus, the stratus, and the cumulus. They just don't have the cumulonimbus. Inside the cloud, droplets began coming together. They formed bigger and bigger drops. As the drops became heavier, they started falling. What makes rain clouds turn dark? Rain clouds have lots of ice crystals and big, heavy raindrops. These block out the sun. Down below, the weather forecasters were standing in the rain. They didn't see us inside the cloud, but we could hear their voices. One of them said, "I hope that teacher knows there's a hurricane watch in effect." What is a hurricane? A hurricane is one of the most violent kinds of storms. In a hurricane, winds swirl in a circle around the storm center at 74 miles per hour or more. A hurricane watch means that a hurricane may strike within the next 36 hours. 36 hours is about a day and a half. A hurricane warning means that a hurricane is likely to strike within the next 24 hours or one day. A warning is more urgent than a watch. As usual, Mrs. Frizzle paid no attention. She turned up the fire and more hot air rushed into the balloon. As we rose above the cloud, the wind started pushing us south. Before long, we had traveled thousands of miles. Miss Frizzle said we were above a tropical ocean about 500 miles north of the equator. When we talked about maps, we learned about the equator that runs across kind of the middle of the earth, dividing the north from the south. Below us, blue-green waves were sparkling. On a sandy island, palm trees were waving. It looked like a vacation paradise to us. But Frizzy said, "Class, we have now arrived at one of the world's hurricane breeding grounds." Class, remember that as hot air rises from the ocean surface, the water vapor in the air condenses and forms clouds, said the Fritz. Down below, more hot air rushed in from all sides to take the place of the rising air. In the middle of the rising air, a column of sinking air formed. We started sinking with it. "A hurricane is starting! Our balloon is falling! Oh no!" Says, when is hurricane season? You might have heard hurricane season before. Most hurricanes begin in the late summer and early fall. That is when tropical oceans are warmest. The warmer the ocean is, the stronger the hurricane is likely to become. "Oh dear," said Miss Frizzle, "the balloon must have sprung a leak." Hot air was rushing out and the balloon was plummeting fast. "Jump ship, class," shouted the Frizz. She jumped overboard and we went after her. Right away, we knew it was a big mistake. The wind was blowing the clouds in a huge circle. The storm is starting to take on the typical shape of a hurricane. "Isn't it fascinating, children?" shouted Miss Frizzle. I don't know if I would find it very fascinating to be flying down through a hurricane. It was more than fascinating, it was terrifying. We were caught in the edge of the storm, blowing around and around in a giant whirlwind. That whirlwind was a hurricane. A typical hurricane has a lifespan of about 10 days. How big is a hurricane? Hurricanes are enormous. Each one is about 10 miles high and 300 to 600 miles wide. In the clouds around us, huge bolts of lightning were flashing. We thought it was all over for us. But then we saw the bus again. It had become a weather plane, the kind that explores hurricanes. We tumbled into a rescue chute and fell onto the plane. That is, the bus. We mean the plane. Thunder crashed and boomed. We covered our ears. Miss Frizzle turned the plane, and we headed straight toward the center of the storm. We had the feeling someone was missing. This talks about thunder. Thunder is a sound made by air. Lightning heats up air and makes it expand. Thunder is the sound of the air expanding. When you open a soft drink can or a soda can, you can hear a pop. That's the sound of air expanding. It's just like thunder, only much smaller. We flew through miles of thunderstorms, and Miss Frizzle took roll call. Guess who was missing? Arnold! He had fallen and missed the plane. Miss Frizzle marked Arnold absent and flew straight into the storm. We'll be seeing stormy seas today, Arnold. Seeing stormy seas? I'm touching them, smelling them, tasting them. He had fallen into the ocean. The farther in we went, the faster the winds blew. At last, we came to the inner hurricane and entered the eye wall, a ring of heavy clouds around the storm's center. In the eye wall, the winds were blowing the fastest yet, and the rain was coming down in sheets. How fast do the winds blow inside a hurricane? The outer hurricane, about 40 miles per hour. Middle hurricane, about 74 miles per hour. The inner hurricane, that eye, 120 to 150 miles per hour. All around were columns of air called hot towers or chimneys. They were sucking up more and more hot, moist air from the ocean. The heat energy from the air was feeding the storm and making it stronger. The plane was shaking, and so were we. Hey, kid, how'd you get out here? Waves will be as high as a house. It's a long story. The wind speed is 40 miles per hour here. They have another diagram of the hurricane here, and you can see they have the eye with the cold air, the eye wall, the hot tower that they called also a chimney, or chimenea, as Miss Ashley would say. Then, suddenly, everything was quiet. Class, we have entered the eye, or center of the hurricane, announced Miss Frizzle. The ocean waves still crashed below, and the winds howled outside. But in the eye, only gentle breezes blew. Up above, the sky was blue and the sun was shining. We relaxed and enjoyed ourselves. We flew about 30 miles across the eye. Then the Frizz called out, "We will enter the other side of the eye wall now." "Don't go," we cried, but the plane was already on its way, back into the hurricane's fierce wind and rain. Why don't hurricane winds blow into the eye? The winds swirl in toward the eye of the storm, but they do not enter it because they are pushed out by the same force that pushes you outward when you spin around. The entire hurricane was moving across the ocean toward land, and we were going with it. The right forward corner of the hurricane as you are looking toward land has the strongest wind and rain and the highest ocean waves, shouted the Frizz. Naturally, she flew directly into that part. It says, which part of the hurricane is the strongest? The right front corner is the strongest because the whirling winds are circling towards the shore. They add their strength to the winds that move the storm forward. As the hurricane approached land, the wind pulled up trees by the roots and blew the roofs off houses. It also blew ashore a huge dome of water called the storm surge. The ocean rose 10 feet higher than usual, and on top of that, there were giant waves. We were horrified as we watched the storm surge sweep over the shore below. But that was nothing compared to the horror we felt when we heard the frizz shouting above the sound of roaring water. "We seem to be running out of gas, children!" Sure enough, the plane was dipping lower and lower. As we fell into the water, we saw Arnold waving to us from a nearby roof. Somehow, Arnold had managed to get on the plane before we were swept away by the waves at the front edge of the hurricane. The water was creeping up the windows. The plane was going to sink for sure. Then we saw a dark funnel shape coming our way. "I've seen that shape on TV," said Ralphie. "I've read about it in a book," said Keisha. The twister came right for us. The next thing we knew, it had picked us up and we were traveling by tornado. What is a tornado? A tornado is a twisting, funnel-shaped whirlwind that hangs from a thundercloud. Those big cumulonimbus clouds, that's where a tornado can come from. Those swirling winds that come down from it and touch the earth. Are tornadoes and hurricanes alike? Yes and no. Tornadoes and hurricanes are both whirlwinds, but tornadoes are much smaller than hurricanes, have faster winds for the most part, and destroy almost everything in their path. Tornadoes can twist at speeds of 200 to 300 miles per hour, much faster than what we read about the hurricanes. After a while, we felt a bump and looked around. The tornado had set us down gently. We were in our old school bus again. We were dressed in our regular clothes again. The hurricane was over. And we were at a gas station. Miss Frizzle filled up the tank and drove down the road as if nothing had happened. "As I said earlier, class, we are on our way to visit a weather station," she said. Like nothing had happened at all. The weather forecasters at the station had a lot to tell us about hurricanes. We had a lot to tell them too. Hurricane winds swirl in a circle because of the rotation of Earth. Hey, that's right. A hurricane dies as it moves over land because there is no more hot, moist ocean air to fuel the storm. The kids know a lot about hurricanes, don't they, Al? Finally, we drove back to our school and finished up our weather projects. Look at all their weather projects. This is what our classroom could have looked like if we had written down all those things that you wondered about weather. After that trip, we needed some time to relax. Miss Frizzle said we could have a party. We had great games, crazy dancing, and yummy snacks. And for a while, we didn't even think about Miss Frizzle's next class trip. What do you think? Do you think you would want to go on one of Miss Frizzle's class trips? What if I took you on a crazy school trip like that? Would you have fun? I don't know. I don't think I would want to be inside a hurricane, but I do think that Miss Frizzle's class sounds pretty cool.